Welcome to the Line Movement NFL show. Today we are talking week 5 picks against the spread. Dieter is out today, but the good news is I do have my good buddy Matt LaMarca with us. Matt, welcome back to the show. It's weird not having Dieter here and actually having to sit in the host chair, but should be a fun week. How was your week 4, my friend?
Well, it wasn't as good as yours, coming off of a 50K score over there, Mr. Holka. But I still had a pretty good week myself. It was my best week from a betting perspective. Had a great Monday night, hit both of those games and a couple of different player props. So I'm feeling good today. I'm feeling good.
Yeah, it's nice to get a big win out of the way. Obviously, it wasn't just me; it was me, Peter Overzet, Michael Leone, and the Tilt Space boys. So if anyone hasn't checked out the Tilt Space on Sunday nights at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, we've been lucky so far. I would imagine that it's probably not going to last too much longer. We might have to change the name of the show to like the Print Space, something like that, if this continues. But Matt, you know as well as anyone, man, like no one is running as hot as we are for very long, right? So at some point we're going to get buried and everyone's going to be there to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay it too, but it seems like the formula has been kind of simple the past couple of weeks. Just load up on the Cowboys and whoever they're playing.
Easy game, right? I think that I do have to give Leone props. Like the real differentiator was getting on Joe Mixon last week, which was
Yep.
huge. So if anyone's watching this later on, make sure and check out the lineup review that I just went up on the Line Movement channel. Also, if you want to see the entire sweat, that video is still up, obviously in podcast form now as well. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, I'm sure you already know this, but leave us a rating and review. Really helps out. LaMarca, it is week 5 already. We were just talking about this before we went live. Like it seems like the first month of the season has gone by extremely fast. But how is, I guess, now that we finally have some data behind some of these decisions we're going to be making, like was there anything that's like kind of surprised you so far to start the year? I know there's a few things that we I guess have gotten right, but I've gotten plenty wrong myself for sure.
Yeah, I think that one thing that we always forget is that the best teams are like the best teams, right? The Kansas Cities and the Baltimores of the world, they're really good. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum. You've got the Jets, you've got the Giants, and they're really, really bad. And then real outside of those, teams on the complete ends of the spectrum, basically anything can happen in the NFL on a week to week basis. There are going to be times where bad teams look great. There are going to be times where good teams look bad. And there are going to be, times where nobody looks good. So it's one of those things where, and I've preached this before, but I think you want to try and kind of take the team out of it when you're handicapping and look more at things like the spot. The Miami Dolphins and the Seahawks were a pretty good example. Seattle ended up covering that game last week, but they didn't look nearly like the same team that they were for the first few weeks of the season. So just something to sort of keep in mind here. There may be matchups on paper that look like huge mismatches, but if the data is telling you that you should be looking in the other direction, don't hesitate to do so.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun today. Normally Dieter's on my side for some of these things, and you're kind of our contrarian person that's like kind of looking at some of this stuff, like the spot, like taking some of these underdogs. I struggle a little bit sometimes with underdogs. So like to start the year, I've gotten absolutely buried by the Cowboys against the spread, just for the most part. Thinking that they're gonna be a great team, like I guess the jury's out on that. They're scoring points. They're good for fantasy. We knew that that would be good, but in terms of actually winning games, it's been rough. I think we've taken them twice already in the super contest, and just hasn't really gone super well overall. Is there a team like the Cowboys that you think you've missed on more than others to start the year? I like this little like 4 week recap because I think this like trying to at least improve, but also like we got to react to some of this stuff too. Like we have 4 weeks of data now to work with, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I feel pretty vindicated on the Colts. I think that they are, better than most people expected. I know that their schedule has been a cupcake, but they're off to a good start. The Cowboys, for sure, I was dead wrong on. I had them winning the NFC this year. Uh, the only thing that's keeping hope alive is that they play in maybe the worst division we've ever seen in the NFC East. So they can certainly still backdoor a playoff appearance. And I'll take a slight L on the Bills as well. I figured they would be good this year, but I still thought that the Patriots were the best team in that division. And the way Buffalo has played to start the year, I think that they are, one of the five best teams in football.
One of the ones that I'm definitely willing to take an L on is the New Orleans Saints. That's one that I thought they were contenders to win the Super Bowl. It's not that I'm completely backtracking from that, but just Drew Brees just hasn't looked good. So if we're just talking about, it's a great transition. This is a professional host transition here, LaMarca. Are you ready for this? So talking about Drew Brees, one of those quarterbacks that is on the back end of his career, but obviously has had a ton of success. Tom Brady just coming out, 5 touchdown passes last week. So we'll touch on the Thursday night football game quickly. They have the Buccaneers have the Bears. It is -5.5. The over/under sitting at about 44 at blitzbet.eu. Any initial thoughts, LaMarca, on the Thursday night football game? And what did you think from Tom Brady last week? Does he still have these games in him, these 5 touchdown games? I was a little surprised.
Yeah, I didn't think he had it in him. And Tampa Bay last week is a good example of why getting the best number is so important in sports betting. If you like the Chargers like I did early in the week, you could have grabbed them at 7.5 or 7, like I did for my picks article. And that would have been a push. But by the time we got to kickoff, that line was down to 6.5 or maybe even a little bit lower. So the Chargers did not cover in that situation. Um, we've talked about, how important it is to beat the number, and that was just more proof of that. Same thing holds true for the Ravens. They were 13 and a half point favorites early in the week, ended up closing at 14 and a half, and they won by 14. So you constantly want to make sure that you're getting the best number. That's like the most important thing that I can put out for people who are looking to get into sports betting. Um, Going back to Tampa Bay in particular, I am very surprised with the game from Tom Brady. I mean, especially when you consider that they didn't have Chris Godwin, and it's not like Mike Evans had the biggest performance in the world. I know he found the end zone, but Brady just was kind of getting it done against this Chargers team. Um, they now get a matchup versus the Bears, who were a big disappointment. A lot of people are expecting that offense to be better with Nick Foles under center, and they really looked terrible versus the Colts. So the spread here sits at 5.5 currently. And I definitely am still on the side where I want to be fading Tampa Bay. I don't think they're as good as their 3-1 record indicates. They trailed against the Chargers for the majority of that game. So I want to be selling Tampa Bay. I'm just not sure if Chicago is the team that I want to do it against. The early betting numbers definitely suggest that the Sharps like the Bears here. I mean, 16% of the spread bets, but 85% of the spread money. Now, granted, early in the week, so we're looking at pretty small sample size. There are only like 1,100 bets or so at the moment, but that's one of the largest discrepancies I can ever remember seeing. So that right there puts me in the direction of the Bears. I'm just not sure again if this team can score enough points to actually cover this game, even if Tampa Bay doesn't live up to expectation.
I wanted to be on the Bears side of this game, and I'm still kind of working my way through it. But the main reason that I am kind of struggling a little bit here is, LaMarca, we have a revenge spot here for Tom Brady, Super Bowl 52 against Nick Foles. Like, is this a revenge spot for Tom Brady? Maybe. I don't know. So I think one of the things that the Sharps are probably talking about is just the Bears have actually been relatively strong against the spread as a home underdog. So that's one of the things that I was kind of looking at this morning. They're actually 13-4 against the spread since the start of the 2016 season when they're home underdogs. So there's a little bit of a trend for you, LaMarca. I came prepared today.
Nice.
We knew we wouldn't have Dieter, so we're going to have to pick up the slack a little bit. Even in their last 10 games, actually. Like, the Bears aren't a great football team overall, but 7-3 against the spread over their last 10 games. So I think that it's an interesting spot. I think that the Bucs win this game, but I think they fail to cover the spread. So maybe I'm just going to kind of middle that. But I think that's kind of where I'm at. But revenge spot for Tom Brady. No one wants to talk about it. That's got to be the highlight.
If Tom Brady has hatred in his heart for Nick Foles, that guy has got to
Absolutely he
be the
does.
most vindictive person in the planet.
I'm,
What more could Tom Brady want? He needs another Super Bowl ring.
I mean, he wants Nick
Uh,
Foles' Super Bowl ring. I can confirm that one.
one thing too to bring up. Normally, Thursday night football games tend to favor the favorite. Going back to, basically since these games have been a regular weekly occurrence, favorites have gone 102.76 and 4 against the spread. That said, this year 0 and 3. So I don't know if that's, like maybe the sports books have finally adjusted to that trend. Maybe it's just we're looking at a small 3-game sample size. I don't know if there's something there or not, but it does kind of make me feel a little bit better about liking the Bears.
We'll keep an eye on that. I think I am on the Bears side if we're talking against the spread. I don't have a ton of interest in the over/under here, but let's move on to one of these games that I think is super interesting. So again, if you're watching this video for the first time, make sure and drop us a like. Make sure you hit that notification bell as well. So like one of the best things about Twitch in general, LaMarca, I've talked about this before on my show, is that you actually get a notification to your phone. On YouTube, you have to hit that bell for that to happen. So make sure you guys do that. This next game, I think, is really interesting for a lot of reasons. So we're going to talk about the Bills at Titans. The Bills are -8.5 favorites. The over-under is sitting at 49 on blitzbet.eu currently. So obviously one of the things that everyone wants to talk about is, a surprise bye week for the Titans last week after that COVID-19 outbreak that they had on their team. I think the Bills are one that I was happy to be early on this year. Obviously, Josh Allen is just playing lights out right now, but -8.5 on the road. What's your initial lean on this one, LaMarca?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to get into the Tennessee mind frame right now, right? Like they just had their first full day of negative testing. They need to have two more before they can reopen their facility. So fingers crossed that that happens, that we get another day with no positive tests for the Titans, and that they can actually start focusing on football again. That said, we don't know which players necessarily have tested positive. I feel like I've seen Adam Humphries, but who knows? I don't believe we've gotten the full list of who tested positive, and those guys could definitely be out for this contest. I mean, Cam Newton, there's already talk that he's going to miss week 5. So I would have to imagine that the same applies for the Tennessee players. Um, that said, depending on who is active for this team, I do think that 8.5 points is probably too much for a team that is coming off of a bye. Especially now, Buffalo has done some cross country traveling. They played in Vegas last week. Now they're back on the East Coast. We've talked about how travel probably isn't as big of a deal now than it was back in the day, but I still think you want to kind of minimize as much as you can the cross country flights, especially when you're facing a team that is as well rested as Tennessee is.
Derrick Henry, well rested. That's a little bit of a scary endeavor. Obviously, this Bills defense has been very strong. I'm not really sold on the Titans defense on the other side. I think that there still could be a ton of success for Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, especially downfield in this one. Tennessee's a team that hasn't been very good at defending the deep ball so far this year. But I will say I think that this spread is a little bit out of whack. I think 8.5 points is a lot. One of the things that I thought was interesting, though, when I was trying to, make a case for the Bills is that, like, as a road team, like if you're actively trying to bet on road teams, which isn't something we normally do, but the Buffalo Bills, since the 2019 season, they're actually 7-2-1 against the spread, which I thought was super interesting. And you don't normally see that kind of stuff on the road. They're 3-0, over that span straight up, which is pretty crazy. I think that obviously last week they covered that 3-point spread against the Raiders in Las Vegas. So pretty interesting spot overall. They're 8-2 straight up in those road games over that time period too. So that's pretty crazy. I know that the Bills are improved, but that was a stat that I thought was super interesting. Thoughts?
Yeah, I like to attribute stuff like that to coaching
Mm-hmm.
and quarterback play. And, I think that the Bills right now have one of the top combinations in that department. Um, it remains to be seen just how good this Bills team actually is. Outside of beating the Rams, it's not like they've played a murderer's row schedule to start the year, and they're currently just 10th in Football Outsiders DVOA. But I still think that there's a lot to be excited about if you are somebody who's a Bills fan or somebody who was invested in the Bills preseason like you were.
Any thoughts on the total here? I think it's, I mean, at 49 right now, I don't know. Like, I'm kind of used to, I guess, the last week we saw all these totals that were over 50, and it was a lot of great game environments out there. 49 seems about right, so I don't really have a lean either way. Do you like the over or the under here?
Yeah, I would say if anything, it's probably a smidge low.
Hmm.
Buffalo, we always associate them as a defensive team, but that's not the case this year. They are an offensive juggernaut, but they're actually pretty weak defensively. So you mentioned already that Tennessee's defense has not been great to start the year. They're getting like basically no pass rush despite the addition of Jadeveon Clowney. So I think that these are two teams that the stigma, or not stigma, but the reputation is that they're defensive minded, but that has not been the case to start the year. So I think this total should probably be a little higher.
All right, so I'm going to throw a curveball at you at some point, LaMarca, but I'm going to give you a heads up. So since I'm the host today, we're just going to do whatever I want. So we are going to do an upset of the week, and we're going to do a lock of the week. So keep that in mind as we move to this next game. It kind of made me think of one of those categories. So the Steelers at the Eagles. They are -7. The over-under is sitting at 47.5. I think this is a pretty interesting one. Obviously, the Steelers, a very good team, a very good defense. They're in first place in the AFC North right now. The Eagles, I guess, are doing okay in the NFC East as well, but this NFC East team or division has just been not very good. I think that the Eagles, like the biggest issue here has to be their woes on the offensive line. Carson Wentz has not looked good, but I would imagine that has a lot to do with him being pressured at such a high rate. I mean, this is the worst possible defense to be going against if you have offensive line issues, right? So what were your thoughts on this one overall?
Yeah, I think too the Eagles have to feel pretty good about themselves, right? You know,
Hmm.
they're 1-2-1, which is basically like being 4-0 in the NFC
Right,
East.
right.
So they can they're certainly not in desperation mode anymore. I'm a big fan of the Steelers here. One trend that I like is when you have a favorite who is coming off of a bye. Those teams have gone 160, 119, and 9 against the spread since 2004. So, you know, the general thought process behind that trend is you're the better team, you're rested, you've had additional time to prepare. So combine that with the fact that the Eagles, this is probably a bit of a letdown spot coming off of a win as an underdog. And I love the Steelers here. I would like to see this line potentially get to 7, but I have no issues playing it at 7.5 if I have to.
Yeah, I think that the line movement overall, that company man, the hashtag line movement overall will be an interesting one. I think for this game in particular, because I think there is probably a lot of value in still taking the Steelers. I have the Steelers in this spot, regardless of if that line moves. Still totally comfortable with it. I think one thing that was interesting in terms of the record so far for the Eagles, like yeah, they play in this terrible division, but they're still 1-3 against the spread so far this season. Pittsburgh's covered twice in 3 games, so something to monitor. I think that since, again, LaMarca usually is here for some of the trends, but I can't let him just get all of that fun stuff out of the way. So a couple of things that I saw this morning as I was looking into this, the Steelers are just 3-7 against the spread in their last 10 games where they're favored by at least a touchdown. So does that scare you off this at all?
Yeah, the Steelers are a historically bad franchise as a big favorite. And there's some conspiracy theories because I guess the Rooneys back in the day may have made some of their money uh, off of gambling. So
Interesting.
there's talk that they're point shavers and stuff, which, by the way, completely unverified. I don't want that information tied to my name.
I can't wait to
Just
clip that
rumors.
and
Okay.
put your name on it. It's gonna be great.
That said, the situation that the Steelers historically struggle in is when they're large road favorites. I'm not nearly as concerned about them in Pittsburgh, where we know that Big Ben historically plays better. I would be much more concerned if this game was in Philadelphia than being in Pittsburgh.
I'm with you. I'm still on the Steelers, regardless of that. But I think it's at least interesting. If this thing moves too far and we start seeing some sharp action on the other side, still scares me with the struggles of the Eagles so far. But we digress. The next game we're going to talk about is the Rams -9.5 at the Washington football team. I think that's the first time I've ever said Washington football team right. It is week 5. We're getting there, LaMarca. It's starting to feel a little bit more normal, at least. This total is at 46.5 right now, blitzbet.eu. I think that one of the things that, I mean, we're trying to figure out these teams that are going on these long East Coast trips. Sean McVay has actually had a pretty decent run at that so far. Easily one of the coaches that I think is the most perplexing in the league. Like, people want to talk about him being like this young run and gun style type of coach, but there's some of the data that says he does some not smart stuff along the way, which is kind of interesting. But what do you think about this game? The Washington Red or the Reds? I literally just did it right and then I did it wrong. The Washington
I
football
know.
team, they're not very good. So what do you think about this one? -9.5, man, huge spread.
Yeah, I think we have to start worrying about when Alex Smith is going to get some playing time for Washington.
Hmm.
It wouldn't shock me if he actually gets into this very game. And I think that that is undoubtedly going to be an upgrade for them. Alex Smith, for all of his warts, prior to his injury, was one of the better, quote unquote, game managers in the league. He's not going to win you games, but he is definitely not going to lose you games. And I think that that trend, or that ability, is kind of undervalued by most casual sports fans who are, primarily focused on teams that can win the Super Bowl. Like, Alex Smith is not a Super Bowl quarterback, but he can get you to the playoffs. And to me, that actually matters. Um, so until we get that change definitively, I'm still pretty skeptical of Washington. That said, like, the Rams were so unimpressive last week. You would think maybe they were just not focused for that game, but I don't know what they would have to not be focused on. It's not like you could say, "Oh, they were overlooking the Giants because they have to play Washington this week." Like, if they were
Yeah.
playing a good team, I could understand, but it's not like that's really a threat with Washington. So, this is a game where I'm a little bit torn. I probably lean Washington and just pray that Alex Smith gets into the game at some point.
Yeah, I think if you're going to be on the Washington side, your biggest argument would be that this defense steps up, continues to play well, gets some pressure on Goff. I think that the problem with that is I think that the Rams really they just want to run, right? So I think they could grind this one out. I do like the under a lot in this game. I think that Jalen Ramsey will do a good job at shutting down Terry McLaurin. I think that Aaron Donald kind of getting in Haskins' face this entire game is going to be the difference. The Rams actually 5-0 straight up against the spread in the Eastern time zone. How's that for some data, LaMarca? How do you like that one? Also for Washington, they're 0-5 against the spread in their past 5 games where they were an underdog of at least a touchdown. So I would imagine they're going to be a heavy underdog in a lot of games. So I like the Rams to cover the spread, even though it is a large one. I do think the under is enticing, though. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, anytime you have two teams that want to run the football, the under is always going to be in play. Um, it remains to be seen if Washington actually can run the football. Antonio Gibson has had some moments, but he's still not a guy that you want to give like 20 carries a game grinding between the tackles. So uh, I agree. I think that this spread is probably a smidge too high, even though it's one of the lower totals of the week.
All right, so the next game we're going to talk about, Cardinals -6.5 at the Jets. The over/under is set at 47.5 currently. Still in the 1 p.m. game, so going to pick up the pace a little bit here. I think that there's an argument that this might be a little bit of a trap game for Arizona, and I hate that because you guys know I love my Cardinals. But the fact is, I don't think there's anyone on the Jets that can stop DeAndre Hopkins. So I think this is a spot where, yeah, the Jets may be a little bit healthier offensive situation if we get Joe Flacco in this game filling in for Sam Darnold, which would be kind of interesting. But I don't know if they're going to be able to keep up. That said, this Cardinals defense has been basically giving it up to a lot of teams already. They've been really struggling, but will a Joe Flacco-led Jets team continue that trend? I'm not really sure. I think I'm still on the Cardinals here to cover even on the road against the Jets. I think just fading the Jets, right? Like, when in doubt, what does Dieter always say? Just like bet against Adam Gase, bet against the Jets. Thoughts on this game, LaMarca?
This is a tough one for me. I wish Arizona won last week. If Arizona won last week, I would 100% be going back to the well with by far the worst team in football in the New York Jets. But it's again kind of like the Rams. It's hard to make a case that they're not going to be focused here because they're 2-2 now, in one of the toughest divisions in football. So they need a win here. They need to take care of business against the Jets if they want to keep, their playoff prospects trending in the right direction. The one thing I will say is that the Jets have been historically bad to start the year. They're 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the spread. That's only happened 17 times since 2004, and those teams are 12-5 against the spread in week 5. So, you have to make the determination of if the Jets are that bad that they are just not eligible for any trends moving forward. I kind of said that last week in my article that, the Jets are so bad, I'm just going to ignore all the trends with them for the time being.
Yep.
And it happened against Denver, right? They were in a great position to cover that game, and they ended up losing by double digits. So I'm going to ignore the trend here, but it makes sense if you like them. The sharps appear to not be scared. The betting activity definitely is pointing towards the Jets,
Oh boy.
but they're just so bad. I can't do it. I can't do it personally.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. I guess it is kind of a short sample size or small sample size with Cliff Kingsbury, but Cardinals actually 5 games out in the Eastern time zone since he joined the team, 4-1 against the spread. So I think the Cardinals overall are super interesting here. The Jets are actually, to kind of play off that the stat that you dropped, they're one of just 4 teams so far to not cover the spread in a game this year. So let's move on. Raiders at Chiefs. -12.5, 56 over under here. We're expecting some fireworks in this one, some points. The Chiefs coming off kind of an unexpected short week after playing the Patriots on Monday night, but they are staying at home here, which helps a little bit. So this is a big total. Do you think there's going to be a ton of points scored here?
Yeah, and most of them by the Chiefs. I just think Kansas City is like unfadable right now. They have thoroughly taken care of business against everyone they've played this year. I mean, that win against the Ravens was super impressive. They weren't as good offensively against the Patriots, but it was nice to see that they didn't need to be. Their defense stepped up. They had a pick six. They forced a couple of turnovers. Um, they're good. They're great on both sides of the ball, and I don't see Patrick Mahomes and this Chiefs offense struggling in 2 straight weeks. I hate betting big favorites, Joe, but I did it last week with the Ravens and it worked out. And I think I'm going to be doing it again this week with the Chiefs.
I hate the idea. Like I've been trying to get better about being enticed by some of these large favorites also, but I think what changes this one a little bit for me is just Andy Reid, man. Like this guy against an AFC West team, it's like almost unfair at this point. So even dating back to
Yeah.
2015, they're 28-3 straight up against divisional opponents, 21-9-1 against the spread. So the Chiefs have just dominated the the Raiders overall. I think that just Derek Carr has really struggled in this stadium. Obviously, a little different without fans, but 10-1 straight up in their past 11 games against the Raiders. I mean, the last 2 times that these two played in Kansas City, the Raiders were a double-digit underdog, and in both games, the Chiefs won and they covered the spread. So I think that one continues. I'm on the Chiefs in this one. It is scary to go after it, but I think the Chiefs are the real deal. Anything else in this game?
Survivor pick. If you're still in your survivor pools,
Love it.
I think this is a week to eat the chalk with KC.
Love it. All right. So Jaguars at Texans -6.5. The over-under is sitting at 54 on blitzbet.eu. The Texans, honestly, they can't stop the run. They can't stop the pass. They're weak in the middle of the field. They're weak deep at corner. Like, I don't know. I think there's a lot of things to like here, even on the Jaguars side of this game, which might be a unique take here. But I think James Robinson, DJ Chark, all those guys are in play for fantasy. I think from a betting perspective, I think that the Texans still could have a little bit of success here just because, I mean, but no more Bill O'Brien, right? Like maybe
Oh,
there's just
thank
like
God.
all the narratives in the world. This team's excited to be doing something a little bit differently. Hopefully, I mean, whoever inherits this job, by the way, is inheriting a huge mess for the Texans. So I think this is an interesting one. I think maybe the Texans squeak it out. They're a little bit excited with what could be coming up next in the future, but I don't know if they cover this 6.5 point spread. What are your thoughts?
So the Jets are one of the teams that are 0-4 straight up and against the spread. Houston is the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I am certainly not putting the Texans in the same category as the Jets at the moment. They still have Deshaun Watson, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. I don't care if he hasn't played, particularly well to start the season. he's still one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the business. So I think that this is an awesome spot to buy low on Houston. I said the same thing last week, to be fair, and they disappointed. But I'm going right back to the well. I mean, Jacksonville was expected to be the worst team in football this year. They haven't been that. They've been better. And clearly, our interpretation of that team was probably incorrect, but they still should be significantly worse than Houston. So I'm expecting the public to kind of target the Jags here. Normally fading public underdogs is the right decision. So there's a lot of just different bullet points pointing me in the way of the Texans this week.
I think one thing that's interesting about this game is possibly going after the over, just because both defenses are not very good. But I think that overall, like just kind of thinking about it a little bit more in terms of the Texans' offensive side of the ball, I don't know if the Jaguars really have an answer for Deshaun Watson. Even, I mean, Will Fuller, David Johnson, does he turn it around now with hopefully some new things coming in Houston? I don't know. Houston's got a ton of problems, but I think they get back in the win column here. I don't know if I like this might be a stay away, I guess, in terms of the spread for me, but I think I am on the over. But any thoughts on the total? 54.
Yeah, probably on the over as well. I mean, the line movement certainly. We've seen a lot of totals that have just moved up at least a couple of points since opening, and it stems from the fact that there have been a lot of overs this year. So I do expect that to change at some point. These defenses should get a little bit better now that they've had some live action. I feel like they've been significantly behind the offenses to start the year, but neither of these teams have been able to stop anyone so far. I mean, the Jags just let the Bengals put up like a 30 spot against them. So, yeah, probably another good formula for some points.
All right, so the next game that I want to talk about, there's some large spreads in week 5. So Bengals at Ravens. The Ravens are minus 13.5 in this one. 52 is the over under. I think that one of the things is always interesting as we start to get into some more of these division games. We'll be talking about this probably in a few weeks when we get the second game in division, which is always interesting for DFS and for betting. But this spot, like the Bengals are winless in their 15 straight road game. So I guess it's a little bit tempting to bet against them, but they are actually 10 and 15 against the spread in those games as well. So sometimes the public kind of goes a little bit too far against the Bengals. What do you think about this line at 13.5 for the Bengals on the road?
Yeah, I think that if I was going to bet against Baltimore or Kansas City this week, like you definitely like the Bengals spot a little bit more. Um, One thing that I thought was interesting last week was the Ravens pulled Lamar Jackson relatively quickly, I think, and Robert Griffin III threw a pick, and that allowed the Redskins to cut the deficit to 14 points. So I think that the back door could potentially be open here for Joe Burrow late in this game, just like it was for Washington last week. That scares me a little bit. Like the Chiefs, I think they want to just run it up and step on your throat when they have you down. The Ravens are kind of just in cruise control right now, so it's a little bit of a different mentality. I think that the Bengals are probably the preferred side here for me, but I don't know if it's a spot that I actually want to bet on.
Yeah, a lot of smart people last week were talking about Lamar Jackson being like a really solid GPP play because no one was on him. I really struggle with like the upside overall in terms of plays in these games because they get so far ahead. Like you said, they kind of can put it into cruise control. They can put in RG3, like those type of things. I think limits the ceiling of those guys for fantasy. I think the Bengals, it's a really tough sell here, actually. I just think that like 0, 10, and 1 straight up in the past 11 games where they've been an underdog of 6 points or more. I get it. They've been covering the spread in a good amount of those 7 and 4 in that sample. So I think the Ravens to cover, it's just this game scares me a little bit. And I hate saying that because we've been so bullish on the Ravens overall as a football team. But we're getting to that point of the season where we're starting to see some of these really large spreads where I think that the underdogs do have a decent amount of value. Any more thoughts on this game?
Just that the Bengals are probably better than most people realize. I mean, they were 20th in DVOA heading into this week, and I'm sure that number is going to rise following their performance against Jacksonville. So I don't think that this team is a dumpster fire like some of these other squads. Washington was 14-point underdogs, and I think that Cincinnati is clearly better than Washington at this point. So that's just another reason to kind of avoid Baltimore. Again, I don't think I want to actively bet against them at this point, but this spread seems too high to me.
All right, moving on to the 4 p.m. games. This is an interesting one because this is a line that I thought was a little bit out of whack right away. So right now we're looking at the Browns and Colts -2.5. 48 is the over/under currently. The Colts are favored here on the road, but to me that doesn't make a ton of sense. Like I get that they have a better defense. The Browns they've improved a little bit against the run, so I think they might be able to kind of slow down the Colts' like biggest strength, and that's probably running the ball as of now. So I think the Colts they don't really have a ton. I guess I don't see them being like a multi-dimensional offense really. I think that it's the opposite for Cleveland because I think they can do it on both sides. I think that now that we have hopefully a bell cow Kareem Hunt, which would be exciting for fantasy. Obviously, Chubb is now on the IR, but we got Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry. I would prefer he throw the ball versus Baker Mayfield because he's like just throws touchdown passes, which is fantastic. They also have Austin Hooper, who I expect to get more involved as the season goes on. But I don't know. Baker versus Rivers, it's not like an enticing matchup by any means, but I think at this spot, I'm kind of on the underdog here with the Browns. Any thoughts?
I'm on the other side. I'm on the Colts.
Nice.
I think that Browns 49-point explosion was kind of fraudulent. I mean, Dallas has just been so bad defensively. Their secondary is just a disaster. And yes, Cleveland put up 49 points, but Baker Mayfield threw for 165 yards. What are the odds of a team scoring almost 50 points and getting less than 200 passing yards from their quarterback?
Man,
It's got
what
to
are the
be
odds of OBJ put up 38 or whatever it was on DraftKings and Baker had, like we said, 150 yards passing? It was the most absurd thing I've ever seen.
it's a basically a nil,
Yeah.
but it happened last week. The Browns had 3 guys rush for at least 70 yards in that contest, and none of them were Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt, Odell, and D'Ernest Johnson. So they're now facing a team that can actually do things defensively. Indianapolis is quietly one of the best defenses in the league. They might even be the best defense in the league. The addition of DeForest Buckner has been that big for them. Again, I know that their schedule has been very soft to start the year, so it's tough to have a ton of conviction with the Colts at the moment, but I still think that this team is being undervalued. Like Cleveland, it's just natural for the public to want to be on a team that scored 50 points last week rather than the Colts who scored 19. But Indianapolis is just the superior team.
Man, I think this one's a little bit harder than you're making me feel bad, I guess, about being on the Browns. I thought they've looked pretty good over the last 3 weeks or so. They're actually one of those teams that's been playing really well at home. Also, this game is in Cleveland. The Browns 6-1 straight up in their past 7 home games, which I thought was an interesting trend overall. The Colts actually 1-5 straight up in their past 6 road games. So a team that struggled a little bit on the road, their only win actually coming last week against the Bears, as we know. So I think this is an interesting one. I think I am going to pick the Browns, but I think it's a really close game, maybe a field goal, something like that. Any thoughts on this total overall? It is at 48, but the defensive side for the Colts, maybe you're on the under here.
Yeah, I like the under. And this game really comes down to can Cleveland run the ball in this contest? Because if you think Cleveland can run it, then it makes sense to back them as home underdogs. But, like 300 rushing yards last week, 160 or so versus Washington, and then 200 the week prior. I just don't see that happening against the Colts. And if they can't run the football, especially now that Nick Chubb is out, I haven't seen enough from Baker Mayfield to feel confident that he can win a game for them at this point. He hasn't really been asked to start the year. The only time that they've needed him to throw the ball was week 1 against Baltimore, and he was pretty much a disaster in that game. So it really comes down to what you think this rushing attack can do. I don't think that they'll have nearly the same success versus Indy that they've had the past three weeks. And if that happens, I think this offense struggles. So Indy might not put up a ton of points in their own right, but I don't think that they will need to. So I like the under and I like the Colts.
Good stuff. Let's move on to Panthers at Falcons. It's looking like -3, 54.5 is the over under. Again, another one of these 4 p.m. games on Sunday. Honestly, this game shapes up really well for points, in my opinion. I think the Falcons, anytime you get a game in the Falcons Stadium, I think that's a positive thing. The Falcons defense is horrendous. They're basically the Texans of the NFC South, in my opinion. Like, their offense is strong. They're going to be able to put up points, all of those things. We'll see if we get Julio in this one. But honestly, like, I don't think that there's much of a scenario where Teddy Bridgewater doesn't have a really strong game here. I get it that there's still no Christian McCaffrey, what looks like for another week, but I still think this offense, if anything, has become a little bit more diversified. I've heard a couple people mention it now, obviously on our Sunday morning show. We had Ben Gretsch on this past week, and he mentioned that people like to think of DJ Moore as this like kind of underneath like guy that's just going to catch some of these layups. And then we see Robbie Anderson as kind of this deep threat. It's kind of been the opposite this year, which is weird how they've been being used. So I kind of wanted to ask you, LaMarca, as our resident, I guess, Robbie Anderson truther, what do you think about his usage so far this year?
Yeah, I still think you primarily want him to be the guy who's stretching the field. Like that's what he's best at. But anytime you can get him more touches, I think that that's also a positive. For sure, DJ Moore is the better player and he deserves to be the number one, have the number one usage rate. But if you can get Robbie Anderson some, mid range type targets to go along with the deep ball, I think that that obviously benefits his skill set. I think that whoever Teddy Bridgewater decides to throw the ball in this contest should have a huge game. Like the Falcons are just an over team right now. The only reason that Packers game didn't go over is because it was a blowout and Aaron Rodgers didn't need to put up any more points in the fourth quarter. And the Falcons didn't hold up their end of the bargain. I think that the Falcons score more than 16 points in this contest. And as long as that happens, Carolina should give us, the 30 that everybody has been giving us against the Falcons this year.
Yeah, I like the over, even at 54.5. I think there's going to be a ton of points here. I think one thing that's interesting, if you're interested in betting the spread, is that in their past games against the Panthers, the Falcons are actually 8-1, both straight up and against the spread. The Panthers, on the other side, just 2-8 straight up in their past 10 games against divisional opponents, 4-6 against the spread. So, interesting one overall. I want to be on the same side as you, LaMarca, but I'm trying to get deeper into the betting trends, man. I can't let you have all the fun with that. Interesting game, though. One we'll be talking about a lot throughout the week. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, the trends are so fun, man.
It is.
I can spend hours in the betting trends databases just trying to build stuff. I don't have a huge lean on this game yet for the side. Uh, I want to fade Atlanta, but I also don't think Carolina is particularly good, despite the fact that they managed to beat your Arizona Cardinals last week. So this might be a spot where I want to buy lowish on Atlanta slash more of a sell high on Carolina, but I haven't really dug too deeply into that one yet.
Next game, we're going to talk about Dolphins at 49ers -8.5, 46.5 over under. We're talking about some of these exciting games. I don't think there's really a ton here overall, unless you want to go back to Fitzpatrick in this one. Jimmy Garoppolo looks like he might be back in this one, so that gives a little bit of support to George Kittle, Debo Samuel, all of those guys. I think there's a chance that they can run the ball a little bit better here than they have recently. Fitzpatrick just did not look good last week. Like overall, like doesn't throw a touchdown pass. Still, it is a serviceable DraftKings play because he runs one in, and just basically, I think he threw for the bonus as well, but still didn't throw a touchdown pass. But I think that just Fitzpatrick being the leading rusher for this team is just not good enough in terms of like them being an actual good football team. So maybe San Francisco kind of keeps rolling a little bit here against a not very good Dolphins team. Initial thoughts on this game. It's kind of ugly, but we got to talk about it.
Yeah, as long as Jimmy G is back, I like this as a buy low spot for San Francisco. Uh, there was talk that Nick Mullins was like a legit NFL caliber starting quarterback, and I never saw it. And I think he got pretty exposed versus the Eagles. CJ Beathard racked up some yards in garbage time, but he's no better. So if Garoppolo is back in the lineup, it's a huge upgrade for this offense that is basically now getting back to full strength. They have Debo. Brandon Ayuk has been pretty sensational as a rookie. George Kittle looked great full strength last week. So if this offense, even though they're down a couple of running backs, if they get Garoppolo back, they should have no problems taking care of business against the Dolphins, who have struggled for the most part when facing legitimate NFL competition.
I'm on the 49ers here. Dolphins, I mean, they're 2-10 in their last 12 games against the NFC. So for whatever reason, they just have really struggled against the other conference. Interesting one overall, but I think it's pretty straightforward from a betting perspective. Actually, in their past 8 games against the AFC, the 49ers on the other side, 7-1 against the spread. Obviously a very good team, but 6-2 straight up over that span also. So I got the 49ers in that one. Moving on, Broncos at Patriots, -11. Looks like we don't have an exact over-under on this game. Maybe that has to do with some of these lines waiting to see if we get Cam Newton back in this one. So the Patriots actually, interesting enough, they're kind of in a unique type of spot because we don't know what's happening exactly with their quarterback. We'll see what they can do in terms of stopping Melvin Gordon, who had a big week 4. What do you think about Broncos at Patriots, another one of these large spreads?
Yeah, I would lock them in as double digit underdogs right now because I don't think Cam Newton's going to be able to play in this game.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe that happens, but this line is certainly being priced like he's going to play. So I like the idea of grabbing Denver. If we get official word that Newton is out, this line almost certainly plummets a little bit. And if he's in, we can reevaluate, right? We can always hedge out of that bet later on in the week. So I like the idea of grabbing them at double digits, potentially against Jared Stidham, who, while he looked better than Brian Hoyer, still was very unimpressive last night.
What do you think about just like looking at some of these Patriots trends overall here? So the Patriots, they're almost always winning these games when they're favored by a touchdown or more against an AFC team. Like their past 20 games where that's happened, where they're favored by more than a touchdown, 18-12 straight up. So definitely a different quarterback situation overall. But I still like the Patriots here. I think they cover the spread. I think this is one that LaMarca makes a really good point. This is one of all the games we've talked about, I think this is one where timing of when you place this bet makes a lot of sense. So I'd be getting in on this one early. Anything else with the game?
Yeah, I love the Patriots trends. I mean, they fit so many of them when you look at Bill Belichick, but the downgrade from Cam to the other quarterbacks makes them kind of null and void to me. Like most of those trends, I looked at Belichick as an underdog specifically for that matchup with the Chiefs, and he is insanely good in that situation. But almost all of those games have come with Brady at quarterback. He's 23-10-2, I guess, with as an underdog in general,
Mhm.
Belichick that is during the regular season. But he's now 2-3 in that situation with a quarterback other than Tom Brady. So completely different dynamic this week, big favorite as opposed to an underdog. But I still think that no one can work magic with guys like Brian Hoyer and Jared Stidham. If anybody could, it was Belichick, but I just don't. I think that's too much to ask.
Speaking of magic, we're moving on to this next game. The last 4 p.m. game on the Sunday slate, the Giants. Like, can we talk about them being magic? I guess about the other direction at the Cowboys, -9.5 in favor of the Cowboys, 53.5 over under, according to blitzbet.eu. Like, this Cowboys team, like, they needed a miracle to beat the Falcons at home. Obviously, it didn't work out quite as well last week against the Browns, but this team against the spread has just been absolutely burying me. I guess it's nice that they've made me a little bit of money on the fantasy side of things. I guess I'll get my one fantasy question out of the way, LaMarca, before we get into this game from a betting perspective. Can we just play Zeke and Pollard in this spot and just get all of the running game? The one thing I'm trying to avoid here is playing Zeke on all my teams and then just watching Pollard come in for one play and break a 30-yard run and just take away my touchdown, man. It's so tilting.
Wow. So does that mean you think that they're going to blow the Giants out in this game?
I mean, I guess I have to double, triple, and quadruple down on the Cowboys at this point, right? I don't really know exactly what to do. I mean, at some point they hopefully will go the other direction and make me some money back in the betting markets. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just a sick fish.
I hear you. I want to be bullish on the Cowboys, but unless they're going to get significantly healthier on defense heading into this game, they have done nothing to deserve to be favored by nearly 10 points against anyone. I don't care that it's the Giants, like the Cowboys offensive line continues to drop like flies. Joe Thuney, their starting center, is expected to miss a couple of games. So there's just so much going wrong in Dallas that I can't imagine laying 10 points with them right now. even against a lowly team like the Giants.
I'll say this, like, we understand that the Cowboys were one of the favorites to win this division, right? So the NFC East is it's a division they've always performed relatively well in. Like, so since the start of 2017, the Cowboys are 15-3 both straight up and against the spread against NFC East teams. So 6-0 straight up against the spread against this Giants team, who I think is really bad. So I actually don't care that they've lost some close games, that Dallas has kind of given some away. I get that their defense isn't very good, but I think the Giants are actually that bad. So I like the Cowboys here. I think they cover. It is an interesting game overall, and one that's going to be a large topic as the week goes on. If this line gets out of hand, is there a point when you would grab the Cowboys, or do you think that you're all in on this Giants team, which seems scary?
I think I like the Giants at anything better than 7.5.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
I really do. Like, there's no reason why the Giants can't score 35 points in this game. I mean, everybody else has. It's not like the Giants have been good. I get that. They've been the opposite of good. They've been very, very bad. But they have covered now in a couple of weeks. They covered against the Rams last week. They covered against the Bears, I believe. So this is a team that while they're bad, they at least are competitively bad. They haven't been like the Jets. So I think that this is too many points. I mean, I know you mentioned that the Cowboys have been good in the NFC East, but typically, historically, NFC East games, you want to take the underdogs.
Competitively bad. That might be one of my favorite things you've ever said. I
Yeah.
like that. I'm stealing that for sure. So this next game, I think is super interesting. I wish it wasn't the night game. This would have been such a great hammer for fantasy. Vikings at Seahawks. The over/under is sitting at 57.5 right now. Seahawks are 7.5 point favorites in this one. This Vikings team, I mean, say what you want about them on offense and all the struggles they're having on defense, but since the emergence of Justin Jefferson, we have an actual threat on the other side of Adam Thielen. It's really helped this offense overall, but also it's helped Dalvin Cook keep rolling. I think that's still what this team wants to do. I think they just want to control time of possession, all of those things. Like in this spot, try and keep Russell Wilson off the field, try and keep Russell Wilson from cooking, basically. Carson came out of the last game, went back into this game. So interesting from a running perspective for Seattle. I think this one definitely shapes up to have a ton of points. Both defenses not very good. I guess, do you have any interest in the over at 57.5? That's a huge number.
The over is definitely appealing given how Seattle has played this year, right? I mean, they haven't played a ton of defense and they've put up a lot of points.
Mhm.
So Seattle looks like an over type of team. That said, I think I'm more interested in just taking the Vikings here. Um, the Seahawks are kind of the anti Jets and Texans this week, right? They're the team that is 4-0 to start the season, straight up and against the spread. Everybody is, you know, kind of penciling them in as NFC champions at the moment. They look that good, but I think that this creates a sell high opportunity. And I agree with you that the Justin Jefferson thing is so big for the Vikings. Like he looks to be the real deal. And putting him next to Thielen and next to Cook, it gives this offense some legitimate weapons. And Kirk Cousins, while he is clearly overpaid, he's still capable of taking advantage of poor defenses. Like I wouldn't want him in a must-win type game in the playoffs, but in a game like this where he shouldn't face a ton of resistance, I think he can do the job. And switching to DFS, which I know your sort of forte, you have to love how concentrated
Love it.
the scoring offense is in Minnesota right now. Like
Mhm.
you can basically bank on Thielen, Jefferson, and Cook to score all of the points for Minnesota here. So we'll talk about this game a little bit more on our Thursday stream when we focus a little bit on the DFS for the Island games. But I love the idea of just loading up on those four Minnesota guys, the three skill guys and Cousins in this spot, because I think that you grab basically all of their offensive production.
I agree with you that Kirk Cousins definitely overpaid, but in terms of like a fantasy quarterback, he's someone that like when he's given the ability to throw a little bit, like he throws deep, he throws accurate deep, but something that people don't talk about enough. And the Seattle team has not been good at defending the deep ball so far this year. I think the Seahawks, for whatever reason, they've really struggled in October. In their last 10 October games, they're actually 2-8 against the spread. So that's probably a little bit of an aggressive trend, but I thought it was interesting. They have done well against the Vikings, 3-0. Pete Carroll versus Mike Zimmer straight up and against the spread recently. So I like this game a ton for points. I don't think that the Seahawks can cover that large of a spread against the Vikings in this spot, which is maybe a little bit scary because we were talking about how the Vikings are just one of the worst teams in the league a couple weeks ago. Now they're getting a little bit of a resurgence on offense. So maybe a stay away in terms of the spread, but I do like this game for points. As LaMarca said, be sure and join us on the Thursday Night Island game show, which will go through all this stuff in more detail. And I think hopefully we have a little bit more news in some of these spots as we progress throughout the week. Chargers at Saints. We'll touch on Monday Night Football, and then we'll go with our upset of the week and our lock of the week. So Chargers at Saints, -7.5, 52 over under on Monday Night Football. Chargers, I mean, they've been kind of rolling a little bit with Justin Herbert. I know they just lost Austin Eckler, which obviously is a huge part of their offense overall, but I haven't really liked what I've seen from the Saints recently. Kamara, Latavius Murray, that's what we're going to see a ton of. We'll see if Michael Thomas is back. Looks like that's going to be something that we'll see. That definitely gives a boost to this passing game, a boost to Drew Brees, all that good stuff. But I think that basically we got to see what Herbert can do against a legitimate defense. What's your lean on this spot? -7.5.
I like Herbert, man. I think the kid's legit. We kind of talked after his first game about how the Chiefs didn't really have time to prepare for him, but I think the Chiefs are a pretty legitimate defense, and I think that the Bucks are a pretty legitimate defense. And he's looked good. He's put up points. I mean, and he's doing it without Mike Williams. Not that Mike Williams is a stud by any stretch of the imagination, but he's throwing to guys that you have never heard of outside of Keenan Allen. So I think Herbert's legit, and I think that this is too high. I think that this is another situation where I want to grab this line now so I can get the full 7.5 as opposed to waiting and seeing what happens. Because if it goes down, you could be looking at a very similar situation to last week where, the Chargers ended up losing by exactly 7 points. So I want that hook. I want the extra half point, Joe. I'm locking it in now.
I lied. The craziest October trend I found was actually in this game. So the Saints they've covered the spread in 18 straight October games dating back to 2015, 17-1 straight up over that spread or that series of games. So super interesting. I don't know if I have a legit lean on this one. This is one I want to dig into a little bit deeper before the Thursday show for sure. I think if you had to put me up against a wall and ask me who my pick is here, I think it's still the Saints, and I think they cover here. Anything else on Monday Night Football before we get into our lock of the week and our upset of the week? But let's put the lid, I guess, on Monday Night Football before we move there.
Nah, let's move on.
All
I'm
right.
excited for this new segment.
Cool. All right, new segment. Suck it, Dieter. So upset of the week. We'll start there. Who you got?
I'm taking the Minnesota Vikings. Am I allowed to pick a Sunday night game?
You can do whatever you want, man.
All right, perfect. I'm taking the Vikings to win the game outright as 7-point underdogs.
Boom. Love the fire there. All right, so my upset of the week is going to be the Browns over the Colts, even though that one's only at -2.5. Not a crazy upset by any means, but I actually am a little bit more of a believer in what the Browns have been doing. I think Kareem Hunt's the real deal, so we'll see what he can do with the full workload. I don't have a lot of faith in this Colts offense overall, but we'll see. I'm with you that the Colts defense is pretty elite. We'll see if this is going to be a true test for the Browns for sure, but that'll be my upset of the week. Lock of the week. I'm hoping we don't have the same one, but we might. What do you got?
Yeah, I've got two that I really like.
All right.
Pittsburgh -7 is one of them, and the other one is Houston -6.5. I'm going to take Houston just because I get a slightly better line there, and I think that you kind of want to take Pittsburgh. So we'll diversify our portfolio here a little bit. I'll take Houston -6.5. They fit that trend that I mentioned earlier of 0-4 teams straight up and against the spread heading into week 5. I think that even though they are winless, they're not a, LOL level bad team like the Jets. And they should be favored by more against Jacksonville. If this spread came out before the season started, Houston would be favored by what? Like 10 points here at home. Now they get the boost from no Bill O'Brien. I think that this is the time to buy low on Houston.
LaMarca, you know me too well. I'm going to go with probably the chalkiest against the spread pick of the week. I do like the Steelers over the Eagles in this one. I think that's one of the more lopsided ones for sure in terms of what this team does well versus what this team's really struggling with. I think the Steelers get to the quarterback and make this a pretty easy spot for them at just -7 on blitzbet.eu. LaMarca, we did it. We did it without Dieter, and we made it through all the games. So hopefully everyone will join us for all the shows we have going throughout the week. Again, if you can do us a favor, toss a like on this video. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this content. A bunch of awesome football stuff in the wings each and every week. LaMarca, tell everyone what they can expect from you on linemovement.com. I know you're breaking down a ton of stuff for us over there on the written side.
Yeah, I'll have my week 5 main slate betting preview that usually goes live on Thursday morning. Um, Last week was my best week. I don't remember my exact record, but we were at least a couple of games over 500. And then I have my Monday Night Football betting piece that I update with some prop bets as well on Monday. That was another good one. I went 3-1 in that article, or 4-1, I guess, technically, if you count the Chiefs bet that I had earlier in the week before that game got moved. So it was a good week last week, and I'm looking to keep the momentum going in week 5.
All right, let's keep that thing rolling. Be sure and check everything out that LaMarca has going on the website. A ton of stuff each and every week, so make sure you guys check that out. Obviously, as we progress, there's a ton of shows that you guys probably haven't been here live for, but I would say if you're listening to this on the podcast later, definitely join us live for the Island Show before Thursday Night Football. Also, the shows get started pretty early on Sundays. I go live on the Joe Holka YouTube channel at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We also have our Line Movement NFL pre-kickoff show at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So be sure and check that out if you haven't already. Also, one of the most fun shows of the week, the Tilt Space at 6:30 p.m. on Sundays, kind of as we progress through the week and kind of progress through these afternoon games. That's always a fun show. Myself, Peter Overzet, Michael Leone. We'll see if we can keep this hot streak rolling. Until next time, guys. We'll see you later.